Abortion and the church, should they touch? Should those issues overlap, or are they separate, political and religious? We also talk about the psychological effect of learning to kill, as well as our current border crisis. My name is Elisa Steele. This is Deconstructing the Culture. Let me ask you something. Are your eyes wide open? Do you know that modern day slavery exists? I recently, over this weekend, my husband and I attended a 6-hour event by that name, Eyes Wide Open, to continue to learn about and get involved with ending human trafficking in our modern world, specifically children being trafficked. Some statistics that many of us unfortunately don't know, but we need to know, is that there are over 2 million children being trafficked. There are over 30 million individuals being trafficked worldwide, but 2 million are children, just the ones under 18. In the United States alone, the lower estimates have it at about 100,000 and up to 300,000 children being trafficked in the United States. And also the United States is the top consumer in this industry. It's the Americans going to the other countries and in our own country that are purchasing these minors for unspeakable acts. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about is, why is trafficking humans so popular? Well, first of all, there's always been the perverse among us that corrupt among us, but also it's especially appealing to traffickers to traffic humans, because unlike drugs or guns, something that is an item that has to be repurchased or remade or there's this another person where you have to get that product. Human beings, you can get them and then sell them over and over and over. You can't sell the same drug over and over. You have to go get more of it. Now, something I know I've talked about this on the podcast before. If you're a longtime listener and you've listened to some of my earlier episodes, you're going to be like, yeah, Lisa, we talked about this. Especially if you follow me on Instagram, this is something I'm very vocal about. But it just, I'm sorry, but it's stomach churning revulsion at the Democrats and the border crisis right now. Because what many people don't know, even those of us who are aware of human trafficking today and the massive sex slave industry that exists, is that it is dramatically influenced in America by our southern border. And it just makes me sick, the hypocrisy from the Democrats and from the left, I should say specifically, because they'll go on and on about the Me Too movement and protecting people, and they'll go on and on about, the border crisis, but they won't really do anything about it. So 2 things. A, if you followed my Instagram story, I mentioned this, but Abby Johnson, she's the woman who the story Unplanned, the movie Unplanned, is about her story. She recently went down to the border this last week and took over $100,000 of donated items and money to buy the items in an 18-wheeler truck and a couple of SUVs loaded with stuff to help the children and men and women down here at the border. Well, while she's getting down there, she finds that a bunch of Democratic elected officials were down there at the border, and they were giving speeches and they were giving little dollar store cheap toys to the kids, and they donated a whole measly $1,000, which is not going to go very far. $1,000 is not going to go, it's a drop in the bucket. And they go down there to take pictures of them being good Samaritans and helping down at the border. Then Abby gets up there, and Abby, if you've ever met her or if you have watched her speech, is incredibly bold. And so she goes right up there to these elected officials and says, hey, do you really want to help? Do you really want to be involved? Do you really want to do something about this? Because guess what? Here in about 20 minutes, I have a massive 18-wheeler that is showing up from Texas. And it is, we need help unloading it. You want to actually help? You want to put your words into action? This is how you can start to help today. And their response was, no, we can't help you unload this whole truck. If we can, maybe we'll have 10 minutes so we can basically take some good pictures. I'm sure they didn't say that part, but we have another photo and media opportunity. We have to go. It just shows you that they don't really have their hearts in it. It's really, truly just for political gain. They're not really there to help. They're not really, their hearts aren't really desperately, affected and wanting to help these people who are here for asylum and are crossing our borders. If they were really there to help, they would have stayed to help. And so that's part of the hypocrisy in just this last week and a small incident of that. Another huge incident is the fact that human trafficking, and like I said, is dramatically affected here in America by our southern border, because what happens is we have awful, awful, awful immigration laws. If you're conservative, you already feel this way. Well, one of the ways that is truly horrific that's happening is, and also a huge reason why I'm so passionate about addressing and fixing the crisis at our southern border, is because our current immigration laws allow anyone, so random adult, mom, dad, doesn't matter. It allows anyone to bring a child to the border and say, hey, I'm here to seek asylum. This is my child with me. They're not DNA testing them. They just assume that's their child. Doesn't matter if it looks anything like them, nothing. They have any documentation. If they just go up with a child and say, this is my child and I'm seeking asylum, they, because of our laws, they essentially almost immediately let them loose in our country and say, okay, here's your court date. It's 100, 800 days away, whatever it is, and say, be here, reappear, come back for your court date to talk about your asylum case. Well, only like, it's gosh, I'm trying to think, like 70% of people do not show up for their court dates. So they're essentially, as long as you have a child is your free pass in. And they come very, very frequently. We have corrupted, nasty people and traffickers. They come with children as their free pass, but specifically, they're not even just looking to get into America. They're coming to bring in children with them and say, oh, this is my child. I'm seeking asylum. And it's their free pass into the country with these trafficked children, who are very frequently, they're sold into the sex trafficking industry, either by their family, or they're kidnapped, or they're taken from orphanages. They are coming from the most compromised positions, and these children are, without any questions, being allowed to pass through due to our terrible laws. It's not our border immigration people. I'm not dissing on them. I'm dissing on our laws right now that allow these traffickers to take children into the United States, where they are then sold and trafficked. And it is awful, and this happens at alarming rates. Now, one of the people whom I love, who is really, really good at voicing this issue, is actually Tim Ballard. If you're not familiar with him, look him up. Tim Ballard with Operation Underground Railroad. They specialize in helping the United States and other countries put an end to human trafficking and to breaking up those rings. Tim, what's special about him is he was a past agent who worked at the southern border to stop sex trafficking there, and now he works independently with his nonprofit organization. So I definitely recommend looking up Tim and OUR. They're amazing. Me and my husband personally donate to them monthly, and we have, this is not sponsored in any way. This is just an issue that my husband and I are very, very passionate about. And I would really, really, really strongly encourage you to find a anti-human trafficking organization near you to get involved. One of the biggest parts of ending human trafficking is the rehabilitation part, and you can get involved if you have a heart for that. So just something, I mean, I know the Democrats and the Republicans alike, they use the southern border in their favor for re-election, but it's just as sick to see the Democrats, cry crocodile tears over the southern border and not do anything about it. Stopping the money and the budget that would allow for the border to be properly funded. And then when they're asked point blank by Abby Johnson, do you want to help? And their answer is no. We've got media going on. It really is about re-election, and it's not about actually stopping the issue, and it just makes me sick. Now, speaking of Abby Johnson, Abby actually recently brought another really interesting point to the forefront of my mind. This is something actually I think about all the time, and I've been hesitant to talk about it in depth. I think I'm actually going to probably do a whole episode on this at another point in the future. We'll see. But abortion and the church. Now, these are Abby's words. I'm going to read them to you. And she posted probably about a week or two ago. She says, quote, We will never be able to defeat this abortion culture unless the church stands up against it. One time after a talk, a priest walked up to me and asked, "Oh, Abby, do you really think we need to talk about abortion that much in the church?" My response was certainly not what he expected. I said, "I don't know, Father, but I can tell you hundreds of stories of women who clutched their rosary beads in one hand while they were aborting their baby. I can tell you of even more women who have asked us to pray with them before we begin their abortion. I can tell you about women who sat in our waiting room reading their Bible. So why don't you tell me how often we need to talk about abortion?" We need the church to rise up, but part of our job is not simply to talk about sin, but also to support women in our congregations who have chosen life. You cannot talk about the sin unless you are willing to take part of the solution. Like I said, unquote, this is from Abby Johnson. And Abby is spot on. To be honest with you, I think that you cannot be a real Christian unless you are pro-life. Let me rephrase that. I don't think you can be a Christian if you are actively advocating for abortion rights. Now, some people fought back on me about that and said, well, what about the teenage girl who's Christian and she had an abortion? Are you saying she's no longer a Christian? I can't speak to every single individual situation. I'm not God. I don't know their heart. But what I am saying is that the active advocates who know what abortion is, who see the signs, who know the full facts, not just ignorantly, they're 16, they've been told it's a clump of cells, that's all they know about abortion. I'm talking about active abortion advocates. I don't know that those two beliefs are congruent. Now, I feel hesitant even to say that because I know that just take Abby Johnson. Abby was in the abortion industry, one of Planned Parenthood's top workers for years. And I can't speak to that. All I know is that I don't understand how it is possible to hold these two beliefs, to be fiercely pro-abortion and also hold on and call yourself a Christian. So I don't think the two are congruent. It's like saying, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe that Christ actually rose from the dead. Okay, so you don't believe in Christianity because God also said that we're made in his image and that he knew us in our mother's womb. So there's that. But needless to say, what I'm trying to get to is it is so important for our churches to get involved because it is Christian women going to get these abortions. And I think the statistic was, and I should have actually written this down so I didn't write in front of us, but I believe it's 4 out of 5 women are self-proclaimed Christians who go and get abortions. So we are a Christian nation, and yet abortions happening at these crazy high rates. It's because of lack of education. It's also because of a lack of a voice from our church. Our church must speak up because this is a life and death issue. I don't understand. I go to these churches and they'll talk about racism being bad, and they'll talk about a myriad of things being good or bad that are also in the political realm, but for some reason they won't touch abortion. Abortion is a heart issue and a sin issue and a faith issue before it's ever a political issue. It's the taking of another human being's life. It is definitely, the church has every reason and every responsibility to speak about this issue. Now, let's talk about what I call the good husband rule. It's completely track changing, I know. So I call this, or I didn't call it, sorry, good husband. I meant to say the safe husband rule. Now, in a world of Me Too, when men are being accused right and left, sometimes with cause and sometimes not so much with cause, a little bit of something by Matt Walsh caught my attention this week. He wrote here, quote, Robert Foster, a gubernatorial candidate in Mississippi, has faced some backlash in recent days after he refused a one-on-one meeting with a female reporter. Foster says he and his wife have long agreed to a system, some known as the Billy Graham rule, and most recently as the Mike Pence rule. I didn't actually know this was Billy Graham's rule, so that was news to me, but totally knew it was the Mike Pence rule, and it's actually a rule me and my husband have talked about, and we have had conversations about this because there have been situations where he was working on a project maybe, and specifically in school, because my husband still is finishing school, and there was a situation where another student who was a female. She was also actually married too and had a couple of kids, but she was just like, why don't you come meet at my house for this meeting? We can talk about this project. My husband was like, no, actually whatever. And so it was a conversation a little while back when that came up, because my husband was like, that's not a situation I want to put myself in, because it's just protection for me in this kind of crazy world. It's just also being about being appropriate. But he was given some heavy just some flack from his fellow students for, I don't know, looking like maybe he was a prude because he wasn't going to meet one-on-one with another woman who wasn't his wife. And that was completely his decision. But still, like I said, I've known this as the Mike Pence rule, and I really admire this about Mike and Karen Pence and the fact that they have this in their life as the vice president of the United States. It's a huge stance for a very powerful man. So continuing with Matt Walsh's words, let's see. Neither of them will be alone with a member of the opposite sex. This is a sensible precaution and has, of course, been met with outrage, first and foremost, by the female reporter who claims that Foster's respect for his wife makes her, the reporter, feel like a sexual object. There's a lot of upside, and as far as I can tell, no discernible downside to a policy like the one the Fosters have adopted. It does, in part, guard the integrity of their marriage by guarding the hearts of both spouses. Most adults understand the extramarital trusts, usually begin with seemingly innocent interactions. An emotional threshold is crossed at some point until, often unnoticed by one or both people, and things can go rapidly downhill from there. The point being avoided one-on-one meetings with members of the opposite sex is to avoid getting anywhere near that threshold. Better safe than sorry, after all. The better safe than sorry principle applies to in more than one way. There is another risk inherent in the closed-door revidenza between a man and a woman who aren't married, especially when one of them is a political figure. Feminists tell us that the false accusations don't happen, but they definitely do, and it will be harder to defend oneself against those false accusations if there are no witnesses. Unquote. That is Matt Walsh, and exactly, he's just echoing what I've been saying. You've heard me talk about this in other podcasts, is in a Me Too world, both sides have to protect themselves, and that looks different for both genders. As a female, I have rules that I keep that are not, they're not enforced or not put upon me by anyone else, and definitely not by my husband or the world, but because I want to stay safe. I don't want to ever put myself in a compromising position where something could happen or there could be some kind of false accusation. And you know what? It goes the same for men. And in a world like this, there was recently that story where Donald Trump was accused of kissing a woman forcibly, and it was all over in the stories and the media, and then video came out and it literally just shows him giving her a peck on the cheek, and then she kind of reciprocates. And without that video, she can slash at his reputation all she wants, and that goes for any man, but especially if you ever do anything later in your life, and when you're young, you don't know that. So word to the wise for young men, just put yourself in safe situations, especially after you're married. Guard your marriage. This is a way of you respecting yourself and your wife and the other women. So huge fan of the Mike Pence rule is what I call it. Now, before I continue on with the rest of the podcast, please take a minute to subscribe, leave a review, subscribe on YouTube and iTunes, and that's where you can also leave a review. It means a lot, helps a ton with the rankings. God bless you. I appreciate all of you who have wrote so many beautiful, beautiful words. And hey, if you don't have time to just write a review, go ahead and just leave a 5-star review. That helps too. All right, now let's talk about this week's book. This week's book is called On Killing: The Psychological Cost of Learning to Kill in War and Society by Dave Grossman. Now, it originally came out in 1995. I read the revised version that came out in 2009. It is excellent. This actually was a book recommendation from my dad, who, shout out to my dad. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but my dad was in the United States Air Force, and he's one of those guys where when you're like at an event and they say, veterans, please stand up, my dad doesn't stand up. I don't know why. And I realized after talking to my mom, and who has talked to a lot of other women and wives, there's a lot of men out there who just don't stand up when they tell them to stand up, because I don't know why, actually. I don't have any insight into what's going on in their brain, but my dad is awesome, seriously. And you know what? He didn't fight actively because there wasn't a war going on when he was in the Air Force, but he served, and I'm just super proud of him for, you know, being in the military and for giving up part of his life to defend America and be there. So I'm really proud of him. But this book on killing, the psychological cost of learning to kill in war and society, it really opened my eyes. It starts out at the very beginning. Actually, one of the first few chapters is on war and sex and how they are different and how society has blind spots. And it points out that you know, by the time you got to the Victorian age, there was a huge blind spot with sex. People never talked about sex. Sex was a forbidden subject. You know, there were skirts. There were little chair skirts and things that covered like table legs and chair legs because it would remind people too much of female legs, and everything was so anti-sex, and it became a blind spot and people didn't talk about it, and it almost, to, I would say, to an unhealthy aspect. And he talks about how during that time, killing was just a matter of life. You know, you had to go kill your chicken dinner before you could make it. You had to slaughter your hogs, you know, at various times of the year, how killing was just a matter of life, and how it was just more familiar, and we knew how to deal with it. We knew what the side effects were, and how killing wasn't a blind spot, but sex was a blind spot. Now he talks about how in today's world, those two subjects have swapped. Now sex is everywhere. Sex is in our face 24/7. It is constantly being pushed at it. It is talked about to the grotesque extreme. And then on the other hand, killing is not talked about. We don't talk about the psychological effects. We don't talk about how video games and the violence in our movies and our TVs and our video games are affecting the men and women who are watching and playing them. We don't, and now killing, because it's not part of our life, because it's so removed from our life, we don't kill our own animals before we eat them. We get them prepackaged, sterile from the grocery store. And so while sex is everywhere and in our face, killing is not, and is now the blind spot of today's world. So anyways, that was just the beginning part that was really, really, really interesting. It goes on and it continues and is very, very interesting. A little bit about it in summary is, quote, "The good news is that most soldiers are loath to kill, but armies have developed sophisticated ways to overcome this instinctive aversion. And contemporary civilian society, particularly the media, replicates this army's conditioning techniques, and according to Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman's DS, is responsible for a rising rate of murder among the young. Upon its initial publication, On Killing has hailed as a landmark study of the techniques that the military uses to overcome the powerful reluctance to kill and how killing affects soldiers and of the societal implications of escalating violence. Now Grossman has updated this classic work to include information on 21st century military conflicts, recent trends in crime, suicide bombings, school shootings, and more. The result is a work certain to be relevant and important for decades to come." It is absolutely spot on. It goes over everything from the effects of close killings with knives versus with guns, how bayonets are rarely used, how for many, many years when people shoot with guns, they actually shoot consciously or unconsciously, they shoot above people's heads. That's why battles would go on and on and on with a low fatality rate, because men have such an aversion naturally to killing their own. So really fascinating, truly, really recommend this. It was very enlightening, really interesting read, and it just helped me get a better grasp on our military, on the violence in today's world. Highly recommend this book. All right, now let's talk about this week's song. This week's song is I Don't Care by Justin Bieber and Ed Sheeran. And I have to say, as far as like the actual musical part of this song goes, it's okay. I don't hate it as much as I hate most pop songs. It was slightly catchy, and I actually don't even hate all of the lyrics. So let's briefly go over some of these lyrics. Starts out, "I'm at a party and I don't want to be at, and I never wear a suit and tie, wondering if I could sneak out the back, nobody's even looking me in the eyes. Then you take my hand, finish my drink and say, shall we dance? Bleep, yeah, you know I love you. Did I ever tell you? You make it better like that. Don't think I fit in this party. Everyone's got so much to say. Yeah, I always feel like I'm nobody. Who wants to fit in anyway?" All right, so let's stop there. Guy's at a party. He's feeling kind of lonely and awkward. He realizes having a girl there, especially a girl you're crazy about, makes everything better. This is just real life. I think everyone's felt this at one point or another. If you've been in love and you have been in awkward societal functions, which I'm sure we all have at one point or another, and then the love of our life shows up, or a crush, whatever it is, yeah, that's just life, and that's cute and whatever. And I've totally been there, done that. And I can tell you right now, I usually won't go into any kind of social function unless I can take my husband for that reason. Sometimes I don't like social functions and I go because I need to, or it's like a wedding you can't avoid, but going with my husband makes everything better because I like him a lot and anything's worth it if I'm with him. So that's cute, whatever. Then he talks about who wants to fit in any way. So he's basically just saying like, hey, I'm not going to try and fit in with this party. I'm just happy I'm with my girl, whatever. No big deal. Then he says, because I don't care when I'm with my baby, yeah, all the bad things disappear, and you're making me feel like maybe I'm somebody. I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with you, baby, yeah, oh, yeah. So let's pause right here. On the surface, I get this. Not sometimes. We all need somebody to be there for us in life, and we all need somebody to lean on. That's why God said man should not be alone, and he created Eve. And it is good for a man to not be alone and to be with a woman. The only thing is, I would say, this is, I feel like, indicative of a culture that is lost and alone, of a culture that does feel like they have bad nights and that they don't know where to turn, and that the nights are very, very difficult, as he puts it. And he just says, and you make me feel like I'm loved by somebody and I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with you, baby. And I feel like it's deeper than just having someone with you to love. It's talking about, to me, I don't think the artist meant this, but in my mind, I look at this as a cry for help, because so many people will feel this way. But I think we're trying to, and a lot of modern youth today are trying to take the relationship wholeness and the relationship comfort and trying to put that into a God-shaped hole. Meaning there's a part of us, a huge part of us, every one of us, that needs God and needs that faith and needs that actual concrete base to hold to cling to, the rock of truth, which is Jesus Christ and our Savior. And we are trying to fit relationships into that hole. And maybe it can feel like a Band-Aid for a minute, but at the end of the day, we're not going to feel whole and loved completely. And we're not going to feel the same thing that we're not going to be able to fill that hole with a relationship. Long term, we have to have God. Even short term, I'd say we have to have God. Although sometimes the bliss of love and that kind of crazed dopamine effect can make us forget that God-shaped hole. I look at these lyrics and I think about the people who listen to them and identify them with them. And I look at our youth, and we do have such a lack of God, but we're looking to fill it in sometimes the wrong ways. Relationships are beautiful, and I am not dissing on relationships and having that special person to go to parties with that are awkward for you and goof around with. That's beautiful, but you have to have God in the beginning and first to feel complete, to feel loved by somebody, as they put it. So continuing, we went to a party, don't want to be at, trying to talk, but we can't hear ourselves. Been there, done that. Oh my gosh, people playing obnoxiously loud music. I just, no. Anyway, read your lips. I'd rather kiss them back with all these people around. I'm crippled with anxiety. So forget the party part of this for a minute. Crippled with anxiety. But I'm told this is where I'm supposed to be. You know what? It's kind of crazy because I don't really mind, and you make it better like that. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This person, anxiety levels and depression levels, especially in youth, are higher than they have ever been. Suicide levels are higher than they've been in a very long time. And he says, I'm crippled by anxiety, that I'm told this is what I'm supposed to be. I'm told this is the life I'm supposed to live. These are my words. I'm told that this is the happiness I'm supposed to feel when I'm posting this cool selfie with me and all these people and at this great party. I'm told that this is what's supposed to make me feel happy. But does it make him feel happy long term? No. Does it make him feel joy and peace and get rid of that crippling anxiety? No, because only God can fill that part of us. Although what he's saying is that having this girl makes it easier. And like I said, having another person in your life, a loving person in your life, is a great, I wouldn't say it's great. I would say it's a Band-Aid, but it's not gonna take care of that crippling anxiety. It's not gonna get to the root of the problem. So basically he just continues to say, everyone's got so much to say. Oh yeah, we walking in, I said, I'm sorry, but now I think we should stay because I don't care when I'm with you, baby. All the bad things disappear. Yeah, you're making me feel like maybe I'm somebody. I can only deal with the bad nights when I'm with you. So it's exactly what I'm talking about. He's feeling like the bad things can go away, that maybe he is somebody because this girl validates him, but a woman or a man, depending on, who you're with, someone of the opposite gender who you're romantically interested in cannot make you be somebody. You're somebody because you're God's creation, not because you have a great romantic partner. So like I said, this song, while it's cute when it's flirty and I can identify with some parts, like going to awkward parties and loving to be with that person you love, it just screams to something deeper of a lack of meaning, a lack of having that God-shaped hole in us filled in our culture. So it just continues on more like that. I'm going to actually skip forward and real quick answer a question because I keep saying I will and I keep running out of time, so I'm going to make time even if we're going over. This is from Julia. Hey, Elisa, what are your views on using contraception of any kind in the context of marriage? Thank you, Julia. So I'm not okay with contraception. That is another form of abortion. So for instance, the morning after pill actually is, to me, an abortion because life begins at conception. So the morning after pill, and then a lot of birth controls, So I would research, if you are on birth control, I would recommend researching what kind yours is and what it does for your body. But some birth controls will just make it so that an egg cannot flourish if it's been fertilized. So I don't believe in those kind of birth controls at all, anything that causes an abortion. Now, birth control, like using a female or male condom, or just something that makes it so you don't ovulate, I personally am not in favor of any of the hormonal ones that make a woman not ovulate, because I think that they're really bad for your body, and have the side effects are so awful. I don't even think it's worth it, honestly. And then as far as, let's just go with condoms. Condoms are not killing a child. They are not doing anything except preventing conception from happening. I have mixed feelings about this because while condoms within marriage are useful at preventing conception from happening, I know that there are schools of thought that say that if you can bring a child into this world and you are married, that you should not prevent a child from happening, that it's going against God's timing and that you should just let God have his timing. On the other hand, there are some times when having a child is just not smart. If you are literally completely broke and you are depending on other people to get you through, and even if you are married, I don't know that bringing another dependent into this world is necessarily a great idea when you're already being taken care of by other people. So I don't know, but this is definitely an issue that I've struggled with, thinking about even just in my own marriage. Like, what does this mean? Me and my husband and I have been married for over 2 years now. We haven't intentionally tried to have children yet. So that's a great question, Julia. Thanks for asking. I know it's not a full answer. It's a partial answer, but I'll let you know someday if I have a full answer. Thanks for asking that, Julia. All right, now we're going to end real quick on good in the world. I love this story. Essentially, a Wyoming congregation in Grand Rapids first announced Saturday that they will be paying the debt of 1,899 families across 4 counties, which amounts to a total of nearly $2 million, according to the Detroit Free Press. And now, quote, "Today, the debt that's looming over families right now, those families that are living in poverty rates or less, have been paid in full as a gift from this church," Senior Pastor Sam Refrigal told the church during his Sunday message. Paid in full, but not held against them one bit. Now, what I love about this is the church stepping up. This is the church doing what the church has done so well for such a long time. And the reason why I bring this up specifically, this church going in and paying almost $2 million and forgiving someone's debt, their medical debt, is there's been so much talk nowadays of like AOC and Bernie Sanders talking about how everyone should have free college, and that free college, or that everyone's college debt, I believe was what Bernie said, that college debt should be forgiven. Well, there's no such thing as a college debt just being forgiven. Somebody had to pay that. Whether that was the state paying it, which means the taxpayer paying it, it's somebody had to pay that. It's not actually free. Not free, and not the proper role of government. But what I do love is that it is okay to make something paid for by a group of individuals who are willingly going forward and saying, I will pay this debt so it's forgiven for you to pay. And that is the role of the church. That's where the church comes in, and they've taken these impoverished families, and the church congregation willingly gave up their money to pay for these people to no longer have to deal with this crippling debt, this medical debt. And that is beautiful. And I love that. But that's not the role of government, because the government is taking by force money, and then they're deciding that they're going to forgive some people's debt, which is also a punishment to those who were responsible and paid off their debt or else didn't go into debt because they worked their butts off to get themselves through school and pay off that. And then now other people are forcibly being paid to pay their co-students' debts. So this is the good in the world. This is what our churches are for. This is what community is for, and it's a beautiful thing. And I highly, highly encourage you, if you don't regularly tithe, to tithe somewhere, whether that is to a church or to some church-like, organizations. There's always a place for you to give. And I do believe as Christians, it's our responsibility to feed and clothe the poor and the hungry. So with that, I just think it's amazing that we have these churches, we have Christian church, we have any churches that are willing to show such incredible generosity, because that is the church's place. God bless you. God bless America.